Hi, everyone. Thank y'all for coming. There's a lot of you. This is part of my reintroduction into society after like a year and a half of hiding in my home. So, pardon my nerves. This is the most people I've seen in one space in like a year. Anyway, so I'm going to talk to y'all about tonight about soil ecology for sustainability. Woo! Yeah, like that. Okay, so I feel like many of y'all know this since I have a lot of soil scientists here. Thank you all for coming. Soil is, woo, yeah. All right. Soil is a living ecosystem that supports many organisms, bacteria, organisms in the soil, and the soil itself support a lot of different ecosystem processes, methane emissions, decomposition, and nitrogen fixation as some examples. Quick aside, nitrogen fixation is when microorganisms can take nitrogen from the air and make it into a plant available version in the soil. So a lot of cool stuff going on in soils. But today we're talking about soil organisms' roles in climate change and carbon sequestration. So quick overview of the carbon cycle. Oh, this makes me very loud. They asked me if I knew how close to hold it to my face, and I said yes. I did not. You can hear me now. That's good. Okay, so quick overview of the carbon cycle. We have our sunlight coming down and being made into carbon and biomass by our producers, our trees and our plants through photosynthesis. That carbon is consumed and decomposed and respired and goes back up in the atmosphere, and sometimes we frack it and destroy the planet and turn it into combustion fuels, and it ends up in the atmosphere again. And honestly, for the most part, that's not that that's not that bad of a thing. So actually carbon dioxide and other molecules in the atmosphere actually make Earth habitable. If we didn't have the greenhouse effect, it'd be 0 degrees Fahrenheit right now and we wouldn't be here. So we need these in the atmosphere, but too much of them is bad. Too much of them makes severe increases in land temperatures and water temperatures, and then subsequent climate changes, or what we call global warming. So not great. Also not great, carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere have been increasing sharply over the past 270 years or so. So we're at about 400 ppm of CO2 in the atmosphere, and these numbers are actually from 2018, so they're a little old. So if anyone has a different number, feel free to let me know. So this is actually almost doubled since 1750, and does anyone know what happened around 1750 that increase the carbon dioxide and methane, etc., in the atmosphere? Industrial Revolution, yes, exactly. So some of the main causes of this increase in greenhouse gases in the atmosphere are burning fossil fuels, transportation, electricity. A lot of that is for manufacturing, as well as our own transportation and living life generally. And another one is agriculture. So I'm going to let y'all shout this one out too. Why is soil important for climate change? Excellent. You're in the soils department. Hey. Alrighty, so yeah. So soils can hold a ton of carbon. So globally, we have about 1,500 metric tons of carbon stored in soils. That is 28 elephants worth. I made this slide several years ago. I'm assuming that figure is still true. It's a lot of elephants worth of carbon. In plants, though, so in all the land plants and all this grass we're sitting on and those trees all across the world, they actually only have about 610 metric tons of carbon, so about half the number of elephants. So soil can hold a lot of elephants of carbon. I've had 2 beers. I think it's globally. Is it per hectare? Per hectare. Okay, thank you. Excellent. We think it's per hectare. Yeah. Excellent. Okay. Thank you for that. I don't think it's per hectare, but we can talk later. That's a lot of, anyway, we'll talk later. Lots of carbon is stored in soils. Main point. Okay. Yay! Thank you. Okay. So soil carbon can come from microbes and plants through a few different sources, and we'll go over these in a minute. One is exopolysaccharide production. A second one is plant root exudates. And a third one, exactly, we'll get to that. And a third one is decomposition of stems and leaves. That one's the easy one. Okay, so exopolysaccharides are carbon compounds that are produced by microbes in the soil and also kind of all over the place, and they work to kind of help the bacteria come together and form a biofilm. And this biofilm protects the bacteria and other organisms from antimicrobial compounds and predation and drying out and all that stuff. So they make these exopolysaccharides, these big carbon compounds, oops, like that. Yeah, that explains it. You can't see this at all. You can't see this at all. But imagine we had a microscope looking in the soil, and we're looking at a root, and this root that had some little tiny bacteria over here, we're zooming in, and we can see that they have this exopolysaccharide sticky stuff all around them, and it's helping them attach to the root, and it is helping them stay safe from water loss and all of that. So that is one way carbon gets in the soil. This is a high carbon substance. Another way is through root exudates, and this is just roots kind of leaking carbon into soil. If you Google this on Google Images, the picture is actually really dirty looking. So feel free to do it. I had to make my own though because it was really dirty. But so we again take our microscope, we look really closely at these roots, and we can see that these roots are leaking carbon. They leak they leak sugary substances and they leak sugary substances and carbons and organic acids and other signaling molecules. And these do a couple of different things. One of them, though, is to attract a beneficial microbial community. Another thing, though, is that there's more carbon in the soil, and we like that. Good job, plants. Yes, cheer for plants. Yeah. All right. Okay, so, and next, we'll talk about decomposition. I think you all know what decomposition is. I hope you all know what decomposition is. But again, we're going to take our microscope, we're going to look real close, and we see this leaf is getting chewed up by our fungal mycelia, which I doubt you can see from back there, but they're here, and our bacteria, and it's getting broken down into smaller and smaller pieces and into carbon and inorganic carbon stored in the soil. And yes, some of this is respired away, but a good amount is stored in microbial biomass carbon, and before it's completely digested, more or less, it is stored in the soil. So this is another way that carbon is taken basically from the air, because this was a living plant that was made of carbon from the air and put into the soil. Okay, and all of these processes, plus a few others, cause aggregation. And aggregation is this combination of these primary particles, sand, silt, and clay, and organic matter, or again, these exopolysaccharides, root exudates, and decomposed living things, or carbon. And sometimes the slide just skips. So we have all this carbon and all of these primary particles stuck together, and that's kind of great because the carbon is then protected within these aggregates. So if it can't be decomposed, it can't be respired into the atmosphere, it gets to hang out in the soil, so that's really good. Aggregates also hold more water, can store more nutrients, and create niches for create niches for microbial life. So typically a soil with higher aggregation and a soil with more carbon is a healthier soil that's better able to support agriculture, which is good. We like that. Also, it's a physically more stable soil typically has more carbon in it. The more carbon that it has, the kind of stickier it is, the more aggregation it has, the better it can withstand forces like erosion from wind and water and just general soil degradation. And finally, this stored carbon can be a climate change mitigator. So, again, you probably can't see this real well, but yes, thank you. And you're in the back, perfect. Okay, so this is pictures of aggregation in the field. These pictures were taken in a field in Senegal back in March of 2020, and we have soils here in this plot that have had no organic amendments for about 20 years. So you can see it's sand. It's just sand. Over here, though, we can see some more aggregation and more organic matter in the soil. And this soil has been treated with organic amendments and with an intercropping system, which we'll get to in a minute, for about 20 years. So way more aggregation in this high C soil, way more carbon stored there, and just more plant life it can support. So unfortunately, soil can lose a lot of carbon too through mismanagement and actually pretty common agricultural practices like excessive tilling and mechanized agriculture, also irrigation and monoculture. And this can be pretty bad. This can cause things like desertification, extreme soil degradation that we really can't get back in the same amount of time that we lost it, and just a loss of arable land overall. So bummer, not great. What? Okay, so how do we manage the soil ecosystem so we can store more carbon? And for this, I'm going to be talking about part of my research and part of my lab's research over the past 20 years in Senegal in what we call an intercropping system in the Sahel. So the Sahel is this vulnerable ecoregion. It is between the Sahara Desert up here and the grasslands and tropical rainforest down here. And the Sahara Desert is moving south yearly with climate change. And this area is also really just geographically really susceptible to high increases in temperatures yearly and extreme droughts. So you know how in Ohio we're getting like, it's hotter and we get more rain. In this part of the world, they're getting a lot more drought. So there's also a rapidly growing population, and all that together makes for not only like kind of a climate change disaster, but also just low crop yields and increased food insecurity. So this data is from Senegal. Y'all look a little bored, so I'm going to speed this up. Okay, perfect. Okay, great, awesome. You were interacting with me, and then you stared at me, and I was like, oh no, I'm boring them. Shoot, you're going to learn something. Damn it. Okay, so. So this data is from Senegal because that's the country that we work in, and the UN is predicting an increase from about 16 million people in 2020 to 65 million people in 2100, and that is a huge increase. Coupled with soil degradation, like we saw on the previous slide, and city expansion, they're facing a loss of arable land, a loss of farmable land. Also, use of fertilizers and mechanized agriculture isn't all that feasible. It's really expensive, and it's hard to get there. And it's also not sustainable. So, local and sustainable management techniques are being investigated to improve crop yields and maintain soil health. So my lab, as well as other labs in Senegal, we're trying to avoid the white saviors in here. Other labs in Senegal are working on implementing an intercropping system using a native woody shrub called Guiera senegalensis and millet and then groundnut, which is another name for peanut. So here we have our millet plants, these tall leafy guys, and we have our Guiera shrubs, and they grow at pretty low densities in farmers' fields, like 200 to 400 per hectare, and they just kind of hang out. They're cut off at the base at the start of the planting season, and they grow back over the course of the growing season, and it works out real well that by the time the millet is tall and the Guiera is kind of tall, they don't shade each other out, they don't compete for nutrients, so they're kind of just left there out of benign neglect. But it's been noticed that there's more carbon and a lot better stuff going on underneath these shrubs. Also worth noting that intercropping is not anything new and not anything our lab has come up with, certainly. It's been practiced for centuries all over the place. Okay, so we think that these crop yields and soil carbon may be maintained by this intercropping system. And we think this interaction looks something like this. So we have our shrub with its great big taproots, and I call these residues, but they're dead leaves. That sounds less scientific, but they're dead leaves. And we have our millet plant growing close by and our millet plant far away. And then we have this microbial community that is drawn to these plants through root exudates and other processes. We have all this carbon that's being stored under these shrubs through the various properties we talked about. We have excess moisture because we have more carbon and more aggregation, and we have more nutrients because of the increase in carbon and the increase in aggregation. So overall, this means more carbon is stored in these soils, and it also makes for bigger plants and higher crop productivity. So intercropping is a valuable method of maintaining crop yields and maintaining soil storage and preventing soil degradation under climate change. It's great because it's local and sustainable, and it has a lot of benefits. So it increases soil carbon and nutrients, which is good. It helps the soils hang on to more moisture and protects against degradation. And also, it probably harbors a beneficial microbial community, and that's mainly my dissertation, but we don't have time to talk about that. But, ta-da! Okay, so coming full circle, climate change is not going away. In the annual report by the International Panel on Climate Change in 2014, they stated human emissions of greenhouse gases are the highest in human history. Again, this is kind of an old number. There hasn't been another report released. I doubt it's gone down. And then in a special report released in 2018, the Earth has increased to this 1.5 degrees Celsius into the 2 degrees Celsius point of no return. So this was 3 years ago. We are almost at this point of no return as of 3 years ago. So things aren't looking so good. But to end on a positive note, hopefully we can adapt by changing agricultural management strategies and other aspects of our lives. Anyway, that's all I got. I will take questions.